Hi, this is Tom Salemi from OIS-TV. Happy to be joined by Vince Anido, Chairman and CEO of Aerie Pharmaceuticals. Vince, thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Tom. Great to be here.
Excellent. Well, you sat in on the breakfast with the FDA panel with me this morning with Wiley Chambers, and you'd mentioned in our talk before you walked away, you thought with some good news for Aerie regarding combination therapies. What was your big takeaway from that?
Well, the consistency at the FDA has been probably the most dramatic difference we've seen in my 30 years or so of dealing with them. And relative to the combination therapy, he hasn't changed his mind at all.
Mm-hmm.
The FDA has always insisted that you take a look at the combination, and it has to be better than each individual component, and you have to do that and show statistical significance at a number of different time points, which we've been able to do in our first phase 3 trial. And then on top of that, they require that you show the clinical relevance, sort of the so what of being statistically significant. And what they look at is an absolute benefit of 1 to 3 millimeters of mercury for each of the time points. And we were able to achieve that. But what's really, for us, the most satisfying is that Wiley keeps talking about the contributory effect. And what we've been able to show in the responder analysis is that 2/3 of the patients that are in the trial that are on Rocklatan get to pressures of 16 millimeters and below with one eye drop at night versus only about 40% when they're with latanoprost alone. So that delta is the big deal, because if you can get 2/3 of your patients down to 16 or below, and we get about 1/3 of them down to 14 and below, those are surgical-like numbers. And so we think that that's the real benefit. So he confirmed what we believed all along has been his mantra, which is statistical significance first, and then 1 to 3 millimeters after that, and show the contribution of the two drugs.
So how do you act on that? What's next for Aerie in that regard?
Well, this was just our first of the phase 3 trials. So we've got another one that's ongoing. The first one is called Mercury 1. It's a two-part process. For us, efficacy at 90 days, that's what we just read out. That study will try to hold on as many patients as we can for a full year, because that'll be a safety requirement that we have to meet. The second trial, called Mercury 2, which is enrolling right now, that should read out sometime in the first half of next year. Efficacy only, 90 days, so it's just like the first half of Mercury 1. And so once we get those done, then obviously we're doing all the CMC things that we need to do, et cetera. So with a little bit of luck, we should file the NDA before the end of 2017.
Wow, that's exciting. So, and how large do you think that trial will be?
Well, they're typically about 700 patients.
What?
So because it's 3 arms, so it's about 230 per arm. And so it's, there's no reason to think it's going to be any smaller than that.
Excellent. And you had some news last month. I think you filed the NDA for Rhopressa, which is exciting.
For a little baby company to have a month like we did, having an NDA filing of Rhopressa and then having great results in the clinic with Rocklatan was really.
We haven't even mentioned the money you raised. So.
And yes,
we'll get to that.
Thank God
in a second,
we raised a lot of money too. But yeah, Rhopressa is a big deal for us because it is electronic filing. We have a team that's actually based in Irvine, where our headquarters is, and they have done electronic filings with the FDA before, and so they were able to really just gather all the resources, because probably 90% of the people in the company touched that NDA somehow. And so it was a big deal. It was a big undertaking, an awful lot of late nights, early mornings for everybody, but we got it done. And relative to the timelines that they gave me when they first started, they actually finished it about a month early.
That's terrific. What is the significant? I mean, in your head, electronic certainly sounds easier than paper, but for a company, what is significant about that?
So the speed at which the FDA can actually review the documents is probably the biggest thing. Because they can sit there, they've got the data electronically, all they do is hit a button, they can consolidate data, they can pool the studies if they choose to. They can do that all on their own. And so you tend to see questions much faster, as opposed to somebody having to print the entire document out and going page by page. And there's still some reviewers, not in the clinical side, but in other parts of the FDA, that still like to see the paper. So we provide that as well if they choose to.
Interesting. And I mentioned earlier the public offering raised $125 million.
125
too
million in
shabby.
a day, and it was actually two different offerings, which we use what's called an at-the-market component. We had a shelf, which is a registration shelf. You put it up, you say, I'm going to raise X amount of money over a certain period of time using any vehicle that I want to, and we had set it up so that we could use all of it as part of an at-the-market, which basically says during the day, you can go out and sell as little or as much as you want, depending on the price and how the demand for your paper, if you will. And so what we did is, because the night before we had announced results of the Rocklatan, and we had something like 2.5 to 3 million shares traded after market.
Wow.
Typically we get 20,000 maybe. So to get 2 to 3 million was a big deal. So that set us up for believing we would trade something like 15 million shares the next day. Our average float per day was about 500,000 shares, but we thought we'd do 15 million the next day. So we said, let's activate the ATM, which we did. And so we started selling into the run-up of the stock. We raised about 50 million, which was the cap, because we just ran out of shelf. And then after that, because our market cap was over 700 million, we became what's called WIXI eligible. WIXI is an acronym for well-known issuer of paper, if you will. So it's an SEC designation.
And 700 million's that's
the market cap you have to have.
Okay.
Yeah. So once we cleared that, we immediately filed that new registration, which doesn't require an approval. So it's a pre-approved kind of registration document. And so Cantor Fitzgerald stepped up, and they had offered us a deal to buy our shares, to buy $50 million worth of our shares after we announced, assuming positive data. And so we waited until 1:03 West Coast time, which is three minutes after the market closed on the East Coast. We then gave them $50 million worth of stock to sell. We had one phone call with investors, and within an hour, we had 1.5 times oversubscribed. And I'm sorry, that was within 15 minutes of our phone call. We were 1.5 times oversubscribed. Within an hour, we were at 6x oversubscribed. So Cantor came back and said, we want to go, instead of 50, we want to go to 75 million. And we did, and so they closed the deal in about 3 hours. So that's the fastest financing I've ever done. So for the day, we raised 125 million. So now, as at the end of this quarter, we'll end up with over $250 million worth of cash. So we have enough money to do everything that we need to do as a standalone, get the products approved, build a sales force, think about a plant in Ireland, think about our keeping the rights and doing some of the development work ourselves in Japan like we're doing in Europe. And so it gives us all the firepower we need.
So are you definitely going it alone? You're not looking for strategic partners for any of these?
We think that the longer that we can maintain these drugs in our hands, the more value we'll create. And so while we wouldn't turn down a strong partnership, and if it made an awful lot of sense for us, we certainly don't have to do that anymore. So it's not top of mind. We still continue talking to an awful lot of folks who are interested in our products, and we'll keep doing that. And if there's an offer that gets put on the table that it's attractive, then we'll do it.
Yep. Makes perfect sense. Well, congratulations for all the
Thank
good
you.
news. Look forward to reporting on more of it, perhaps in the spring.
Well, I hope we have more months like September.
I hope you do too.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.